So we want to talk about projects this morning. Project 4. How many want to talk about Project 4? Come on, let me see something. So why are the rest of you here? Does anybody want to talk about Project 3? Okay. You know, that would be okay. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about Project 4, is that right? So questions. What kind of questions do we have? Before we start, I was thinking about doing a mock interview. I'm the interviewer, and anybody who's interested will come in and interview for a job with me. Okay, just to pretend. And I would ask you to explain your projects and solve a little puzzle on the board, write a little bit of code, stuff like that. And I'll put you on the bus if you don't pass, okay? Or I'll hire you if you do pass. Who would be interested in that? Raise your hand if you'd be interested in that. Okay, so probably wouldn't do it until maybe the first week after graduation. Would that, you guys, the guys who are interested, would you still be around then? No, you wouldn't be around then. I might be able to do it a little bit before, I'm not sure. I'm real busy right now. But so when are you leaving? Hmm?
Do you offer phone interview? Phone interview.
Phone interview. Yeah. No. So I'm not going to do phone interviews. Okay. I'll do a mock interview. But when are you leaving? You know, when are you not available to do that? Or are you? Are you going to be here? You know, you're not. So if I do it earlier, will you be here? Are you okay? So I'm trying to find out what earlier means. When are you going?
May 5th, maybe.
The 5th, May 5th?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I did it before May 5th, you could attend.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm not sure I can do it that soon because, you know, we got grading and stuff, so we'll see. But okay. Alrighty. Anyway, I think I'll do it. You know, I haven't really made up my mind, but I think it would. I've been getting people in my office, people who should be doing well, who are saying I got rejected here, I got rejected 4 times. You know, they're doing something wrong in the interview, I think. And so this is just, trying to help people understand what it is wrong that they're doing in the interview and what they should be doing. So, you know, I've managed I worked in industry for a lot of years, and I managed 3 different software engineering organizations, and I hired a lot of people. And so, it's my bias. You'll hear how I think an interview ought to go. And it might be totally, if you went to Google, it might be totally different. But, I think any kind of practice is probably a good thing. So, all righty. So questions about projects. Project 4. Yes, Harika.
In project 2, we use browser to find files. We use queries also. Now in project 3, we kept browser as just to display the contents of the repository. Shall we keep the browser thing in project 4?
So what I think the browser should do in project 4 is should be able to find a file, display its source code, and display its description.
Just not browsing the repository directories.
In the repository, yeah, it's not. You don't have to browse outside, although you could design it so you could browse anywhere. But I think just browsing inside the repository is fine for project 4. Totally appropriate. In fact, it's probably better because in general you don't want people to be able to. If you were putting a browser for a lot of people to use, you don't want them browsing all over the. So just yeah.
Do I still need to implement a browse tab if I have a list box item, so I can click and pop up a new window?
Yeah, I don't think your GUI has to have a browse tab, but it's got to be really obvious to somebody. Your GUI has to make it obvious to somebody how they do that. If you have a browse tab, then it's easy to do. In the browse tab, you just show that navigator and maybe you have a little help that just a little tooltip help that says click on a file to view its contents or something.
Maybe we can do the same thing like in the list.
I don't want to. This is never a question of you implementing exactly my idea of an ideal GUI. I want you to design it. And so you got some freedom. As long as it's clear to the user how to check in, how to check out, how to browse, how to do how to connect, that's fine.
I mean, it's in the requirement, that's why I asked.
Let's look at the requirements. So did I say you had to have a browse tab? Let's see what I said. I know in project 3 I said it just to force you to have a tab display, that's all. But here, shall provide a repository server that provides that functionality, shall provide a client, shall provide message passing communication system, shall provide support for passing HTTP style messages, communication. So you can do the GUI any way you want, but it's got to be obvious, So yeah, so we did that on project 3 because I really wanted you to build a tab display and know how to do it. And I think building a tab display here is fine. And were I doing it, I probably would have a browse tab in which I did the navigating. Okay. But you're not obligated to do that. These requirements don't hold you to that. But it's got to be clear to the user how to do those things. If it isn't clear, you'll lose design points. You won't lose requirements points because the requirements are really quite loose. Requirements say, assemble what you've already built in earlier projects. Essentially, that's what it says, right? But you have to demonstrate clearly that it all works, and it's got to be clear to a user. So, you're still going to demonstrate with TAs with their hands behind their back, you're going to demonstrate that everything works. But then, they'll use your GUI a little bit, and it needs to be clear. And they'll take off design points if it isn't clear. Okay. Other questions? Yes?
So the browse doesn't have to have any kind of advanced search, like search packages which has following dependencies, something like that?
It would be really nice if it did. You have a NoSQL database, you have a query mechanism, so you certainly could do that. There's no requirement to do that, but if you do it, we'll all smile, and it's a good thing to have us smiling when we're deciding what your grade should be. So I think that's a great, all the tools are there to do it. So I think that would be a really good thing to do, you know. I think one of the big issues for Project 4 is the NoSQL database gives you lots of capability, but you don't want the user to have to know all the details about how to use a NoSQL database in order to use a repository. So you need to make it easy, if you will, in part, this GUI is a simplifier of the NoSQL database information retrieval, okay? So, Ritesh, right? Other questions? Yes?
I think in the project 2, we're required to check in or check out files in a single directory. But in the project 3, according to the demonstration that you have handed out to us, in the browse function, it can list out the subdirectories in the
Yeah, in Project 2, you weren't required to have them in a single directory. I didn't make you have them in multiple directories, but you weren't required. You know, it was simple, and I probably said, you know, to keep things simple, you can do that. But I think a repository with a single directory is a very limited thing. I think you should be able to handle multiple directories, and that's why the browse that I gave you can go into arbitrary, you know, directory depths.
But the check-in and check-out functions that we implemented in the project 2 is transparent. So the check-in to the server is transparent to the client, so that they don't know what directory or subdirectory that we check into.
I think
this should be managed in the server side, and our SQL database or our project 2 test bed should be able to track it, which means either our project 3 or our project 4 should have a user program in the server side to handle the subdirectory move action.
I agree with that. I don't think the user should decide where in the repository a check-in will go, but I think the user needs to be able to browse around the repository. Okay, a repository might have 10,000 elements in it. You're going to give them a flat 10,000 element list? I don't think so. It'll be useless.
It needs
Okay.
another user program in the server side shipped with this.
You know, I don't want to design it for you. I don't think the client should be telling the repository where to put stuff. I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that there's some sort of policy, maybe based on categories or something like that, that will allocate where the check-ins go. But you know, it might be done by project. You know, a company might have 4 or 5 projects going, and there might be project directories or something, and it shouldn't be up to the user to decide where. But on the other hand, the user should be able to go, I'm working on project 2, but I want to see what you did on project 3. You got some code that's interesting to me. I want to be able to go look at it.
But what I want to ask is, should we also provide the mechanism in the server side to track the files in the subdirectories?
I agree that the server should be responsible for placing files in a particular directory. I don't argue that with you.
But this will be another requirement.
No.
This is not a requirement, it is a recommendation, right?
It is a recommendation, and if we look at your Project 4 submission and say there's no way this could possibly work for more than 100 files, you'd lose a design point or 2 because it wasn't well designed. It really should do, you know, there should be some structure that allow us not to have to deal with a flat list of thousands of files. That's totally impractical and unworkable. Okay? With me? So you're unhappy with that comment, but that's okay. That's the nature of the, you know. So I didn't force you to use a directory structure early on because I was trying not to have you do everything in project 2. Okay. But, you know, there's no obligation as long as your repository would work well with a large number of files. I have we'll have no argument with you at all.
What is the meaning of work well with a large amount of files?
You got 10,000 files. Find something in the next 1 minute in that 10,000 files.
It's simple. We can use the query of NoSQL database.
If you make that so if it's clear to the user how to construct this query to find what they want, okay, I won't argue with you. You know, if you make the query mechanism, it's the same answer that I gave to Ritesh. If you make the query mechanism simple for the user to use, then if you have one big flat directory and you're using queries to give structure to that, that's fine. I don't have any issue with that. Okay? I think I would, for administration purposes, have multiple directories, but. And again, you know, I mentioned, I think it was in class, I don't know, but it's entirely reasonable, feasible for you in that Navigator style browse facility that I demoed for you, to have a provider that gives, you know, what amounts to structure. They might not be real directories, they might be categories or whatever you want, you know, and it could be totally query based. So you could have an entirely flat single directory repository, but lots of perceived structure because of the way, you know, your provider is presenting information to the user through that. You know, that would make a whole lot of sense. So here you're using exactly what I had, but instead of always placing directories in the top pane and always placing files in the second pane, maybe there are categories in the first pane, or maybe there are, you know, certain kinds of query details or something. That's fine, and that would be a good design. That's a very flexible. Using a provider behind the browse facility is a really good thing to do. Other questions? Going to be a short help session? Yes.
So what should the view files do? Show the file in the client and the server.
So it doesn't do any good to show the file on the server because nobody's there looking at it. You know, presumably it's on another machine, sitting in a closet somewhere. Nobody's there to see it. So when you browse, what should happen is you're going to get a listing. You know, barring TNUs, let's assume that you're going to have directories, and you know, it could be something like TNU wanted to do, and that's fine. But so I see a set of directories and files, and I can navigate around, and I'm continually, well, I navigate by querying the server to give me directories and give me files, just like you saw in my code. Okay, and now when I find a file, what should happen is I double click on that. What happens is I send a message to the server to send me that file. It sends me the file, and I open it up in a pop-up window, and I show its description. Okay, that's what I would do.
This is what the browse do. This is what the browse do.
Exactly what I just described.
But here in project 3, we are asked to have a button such as view files.
I asked you to have a button,
No tab for view file.
a tab for browse.
View file and view file.
Yeah.
Well, that's yeah. It just meant, all that was meant is there is for project 3, all you were really asked to do is to have tabs that would send messages and just display that the tabs work, and you didn't really have to do anything. I said it's good you know, a good way to demo that is to pop up a window that showed the file, okay? But you weren't obligated to do it that way. But, you know, what I would do is I would have a Browse tab that would show exactly that two-pane window that I had in the Browse tab, and when I double-clicked on a file, I would pop up another window that had the file contents and the description out of the NoSQL database. Okay? So that's what I would do. But that's not what, you know, I don't want to mandate your design. I want you to design it. Okay, so, you know, I want to give you the freedom to do that. All right? Good. Other questions? Do I get to go back to my office and get some work done? Yes, Ritesh.
What level of demonstration is required for check-in, check-out, and browse? So in project 3 we had a little bit of, project 2 we had a little bit of detailed ones where we showed various scenarios of check-in, the ownership policy, etc. So do we need to do all that?
Yes. You need to, and hopefully you can just steal what you did in project 3, you know, and maybe fine-tune it a little bit for project 4. But, you know, the idea of making these progressive projects is that you can build on what you've done before. And for two reasons. One is this is a fairly big, you know, by the time you get done, it's a fairly big piece of work. And so it lets you stage that, encourage you to stage that. And it also gives you the opportunity to observe, gee, I'm having trouble using that earlier work. What was wrong with my earlier work because it gives me so much trouble to use it now, okay? That's why it's done that way. To give you that grand experience of almost failure, because, you know, that's a really good thing. Because it makes you sit back and think about it. What did I do wrong? Why is it this way? Okay. Right? Self-criticism. You know, that editorial red pencil is wonderful. There's a lot of similarity between designing and implementing software and writing expository essays or something. You know, you want a concept, strong concept, you want good organization, and a swift editorial red pencil to get rid of all the cruft. You know, you make a pass and you say, okay, gone, 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 simpler, simpler. Okay? Yes?
Is this a good idea if we implement like...
No.
If we implement like admin, so that we can...
The admin is a good idea, but my suggestion to you is there's no requirement for administrative capability here. And, you know, if you're bored and don't have anything to do and you need some extra thing to occupy your time, be my guest and put admin, but you won't get any, you know, you'll get us to smile and probably, you know, but I think you could spend your time better working on making sure that you implement the fundamental properties of the...
And how about file sync? I mean, do we have to like sync the file between client and server?
No sync, no sync. Sync is you got to be really careful with sync. You know, I've had in the DO class directory synchronization, you know, and people, their mental model is, I'm going to take this directory and synchronize everything down that directory tree. And that's so dangerous. Somebody makes a mistake and they actually say C, and crash the whole machine because it copied 10,000 junk files all over the machine. Okay? So syncing, you got to, you know, to do syncing well, you need to think really carefully about the policy that you want to apply for that synchronization. Do I just want to make this side have files no later than on that side? Do I want to have this side exactly like that side, meaning I go delete stuff here? You know, there's a whole bunch of policies that, you know, and that's not part of this project. Okay. So I would absolutely not sync. You know, suppose somebody was working, a developer was working away, had a whole bunch of stuff, you know, and they went and looked at the repository, and the repository went, oh, delete, 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 all that stuff he just built, you know, just to make it synchronized. Okay. You know, you have to think those policies through really carefully and have lots of safeguards so that kind of crazy stuff doesn't happen. So I wouldn't. Okay.
And how about ownership?
Ownership is, you know, it's an interesting question because clearly not everybody has the same ideas about ownership. My ideas of ownership are totally different than Linus Torvalds. Okay? My ownership, Git doesn't work for me. Git is a nice, you know, the mechanics are nice, but it's totally useless to me because it doesn't fit my style. You know, I tried using Git for a while, and I wound up with repositories, you know, clone this, clone. I would clone the project, you know, which is the latest clone? I don't know. I don't have a clue. Okay, you know, you have to have a discipline. That's what you really want is a repository that you can make match your discipline, your way of working, not say, developer, you have to use my scheme. Okay, so it's really nice to have a pluggable policy. You know, of ownership and things like that. And pluggable is really, you know, I was talking about components yesterday. Pluggable is really quite straightforward. You have an interface, and it's straightforward in one sense and not straightforward in another sense. You have an interface and an object factory, and that's enough to make it pluggable. But the issue always is, how do I design the interface language to be broad enough so it'll work for single ownership and multiple ownership and lock checkout and, you know, all those things. Okay? So really good exercise, good use of your time. If you have the time to do it, great. But also, that's a nice thing to work on in the summer as a summer project. You know, let's make it really pluggable. Think hard about what does that interface have to be. You know, I did one example, that ownership example on the midterm, okay, and that was a very spare. The example I gave you was a very brief, you know, very short contract, but fairly, you know, I thought about it a little bit, and I think you could make it work in several different schemes of ownership, okay? So you need to think those things through, and again, that would be a really great thing to do as a summer, part of a summer project. Okay. Yes, Tenyu.
Is the ownership policy a requirement for our next two projects? Should we demonstrate it or implicitly or explicitly?
I hope I made that an explicit requirement somewhere in these sets of projects.
I think in the project 2, when the last time I visited the project 2 period, you said that it's too late to add the user policy requirements to this requirement, so that you will remove it, the related description, so that we did not see the ownership policy requirements in the requirements in the project 2. But
I really think it belongs here. I need to be fair to everybody, you know. That's a really good question. I would like ownership to be an ownership policy to be a requirement of this. The question is it fair for me to change this now, to insist that? What I will do is I'll go back and look at those earlier requirements, and if I had a strong earlier requirement for ownership, then I'll put that same requirement here. If I didn't, I won't. But I believe it should be. A repository isn't worth much without a functioning ownership policy. It can be simple. You know, single owner policy is really easy to implement. And I like single ownership policy. I think that's the right way to do things. I think development should be, developers should be building fine-grained, small pieces that get aggregated together, and as long as you're building small pieces, the idea is that each piece is the responsibility of one person, and the way it works is the responsibility of one person. If you allow group ownership, you're opening yourself up. As a manager, I would detest group ownership, because what that opens up is the possibility of there being a problem with a component, and one guy says, that's her problem. That's her problem, and she's sitting there saying, that's his problem. Finger pointing, you know. But if there's a single ownership, we know where the problem is. Easy to resolve. Okay? Ritesh, go fix it. Right? So, or Jim, go fix it. So, I worked for a guy. I used to try to pick my jobs so that I worked for people that I really admired and could learn from, and I worked for a really smart program manager for a while. Really good guy. He was great at working with customers. And one of the things he said to me is, you know, I want everybody to be forced to take the consequences of their good and bad work. And so if you were writing requirement specification, you had to be on the test team. Because if the requirements weren't well written, the test is a mess. So you write requirements, you're on the test team. If you're a developer, you unit test. Not going to be a test team. You're not going to be allowed to throw code over the wall that's a piece of junk for the test team to fix. Okay, so arrange things so people have to take responsibility for their actions. But anyway, so I'll go back and look at those earlier requirements. I may change this to put a few of those things in here. So I want to be fair to everybody. But how many have implemented an ownership policy in their current work? Raise your hand if you've implemented an ownership policy. So a few have, but many have not. I think what I may do, I'll go back and look at the earlier specs. What I may do is, if you have a clear demonstration of implementing an ownership policy, and maybe a couple of other policies, we'll give bonus points for it instead of, something like that. I want to be fair, because this has been out a while, and it's clear there's no requirement to do ownership policy, so, it's one of those, whoops, the customer forgot. Okay, so, all right, so. Other questions? So, a single ownership policy is really quite straightforward. You have to, when you check in, guys, when you check in, you have to be checking all along. We've said really clearly, you got to check the author, make sure that that person is allowed to check this in. For the very beginning, that's been a fundamental piece of the design. And so making a single ownership policy is almost nothing. All you got to do is reject a check-in if that, if the person, so the person, you have to have identification of the person, and you don't have to do fancy credentials, blah, 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 blah. You don't encrypt it, none of that. Just a simple name, the name in the check-in information, if it doesn't match the name in the check-in for single ownership policy, you reject the check-in. Just fail the check-in. So, and anybody can check out. Anybody can check out, but only the author can check in. So it's almost trivial to implement single ownership check-in. But you'd certainly be allowed to implement a different kind of ownership policy as long as there was some policy. I mean, allowing anybody to do anything with it is not a policy. But you might accept a group of people, and anybody in this group can check in, but now you got to decide, how do I check out? If I check out, do I lock it when somebody checks it out and nobody else can get it out? That really is single ownership policy, you know, appearing to be, you know. But if you don't lock it, that means that you have to do a merge before it's checked in, and how do you guarantee that a merge has been done? You know, you can. I mean, you could have a voting scheme. You know, every member of that team would have to say yes, okay, or something. You know, so that's why I don't like. You know, I'm a big fan of single ownership policy because it's simple, straightforward, and I think it's very workable. But other questions? So, Tian, you do me a favor and send me an email about the ownership question, about the ownership policy question, okay? And I will think about what we're going to do, but I'll go back and look at the earlier requirements. Other questions? Everybody able to transfer files okay, and you know, all that working? No questions? No more questions? Are we done? I'm not going to get up here and do a song and dance to entertain you, okay? do a moonwalk or something. I can't do that. I wish I could. All righty. I think maybe we're done. So, going once? Going twice? Yeah, you silent guys, you know. Some of you guys who've been really silent, I have the idea that maybe you're in big trouble. Should I kick everybody else out, but just have a small group of those who think they're in trouble, who want to talk about it? I tell you what, I'm going to end this, ask all the people who've been asking questions to leave, and if there's anybody left sitting here, okay, I'll talk with you a little bit if you're, you know, assuming that you're in big trouble. So the question is, how do I survive? How do I, you know, do enough to survive? All right, why don't all the people who've been asking questions get up and leave, and you know, if everybody leaves, I'll leave, but if there's people sitting here, I'll stick around and talk to you.
My project to design now? Or
Let me see if, why don't you just stick around, have a seat, and we'll see if anybody's left here who wants, you know, basic help. And if there isn't, then we'll look at it right away.
So I didn't have a chance to get my project to Visual Basic.
Why don't you have a seat? I'm going to see who's left. What I'll probably do is, before I start with anybody, if there is anybody left, we'll just go and get it for you. Okay, so just stick around. It won't be long. Yep.
I have a quick question about your code. When you, like behind the GUI, you have a translator that keeps posting messages.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't show up in the console application because I think the console application is set to
It won't.
the server prototype. That's the console only
On
display
my,
that.
when I ran the prototype, the GUI, when I made it a console, the translator was, you saw the translator messages. They were being written to the console.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I think when you run it,
When I ran mine, the console messages were there.
sorry, let me close this. I think it doesn't. I don't think it shows. Probably not right here.
Is it set as console? So just take the
Oh,
go to the
set
GUI,
the
go to the
GUI.
GUI, and on its properties, set it to on the application, set it to right here. Click and set it to console.
So that it will pop up. The console will
The console
display
will
both.
pop up too, and now you'll see the translator messages on that console.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
When is the Tuesday class and can I get the project too?
Yeah, I will go. Somebody else is waiting for theirs too. I will. I want to see if there's anybody left who wants help, and then as soon as I see if there's anybody left, if there's nobody left, I'll just shut down and we'll go and get it. And if there is somebody left, I'll leave my stuff up, but then we'll go and get it. So just hang loose for a couple of minutes.
I talked to you yesterday, and I'm not quite sure when is the time I can come see you.
You wanted to talk about your design?
Yes.
Yeah. Just about right away. Wei Hung wants to talk about his design too, and so it depends on whether there's anybody here who really wants basic help. Just have a seat, and then as soon as I sort that out, then we'll decide. Is there anybody here who's waiting for basic help? No? Okay, then I will shut down. Yeah. Are you waiting for basic help? Oh, okay.
Questions. Like, I know my project was really bad. Okay, like it's like there are times that you know that this is not
Yeah.
going to work ahead.
Yeah.
And I know it's not going to help my project forward. Like, I know that about the ownership, I know that I couldn't implement it. I knew that. While doing it, I faced a lot of problems with managing my directory and getting the repository right. And
Did you ever sit down with the TAs to
yes,
get some help? You did?
I had an appointment with Kumar, but I think he had some work and I had some work, and I'm working as well. So all of those things. But Amar said he's going to help me, so I'm coming Friday as well.
Okay. I can post, I'm willing to post one of the good projects from, I don't have the time to implement my own, but I'm willing to post one of the good projects from another student. What has to happen is, I know which ones are really good now, and for the project twos, and I need to communicate with the authors of those projects to see if they're willing to have me post them, okay? But, so, then you can look at it and see what they did and get some help that way.
Because
Okay.
now we don't have time, like we can go ahead and implement project 2 all over again, and then project 3 is on the way, like I'm already working on project 3. So while the time project 4 comes, I need to do all of this stuff, and then there are terms.
Yeah, that's why I say I can put
Yeah,
up I can put up somebody's project too.
Yeah, so that would be really helpful.
And yeah, I'll do that, but I think you should still plan on working with Amar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. All righty, so here's the game plan. Were you waiting to get basic help? You? Yeah.
I want to get some help.
Okay. So do I need to leave my stuff up? So why don't you come, you can come and ask questions. So why don't you guys just sit tight? I'm going to go get projects. There's several people who need their project twos. I'll get them. And why don't you? So who all wanted to talk to me about design? You two guys. So why don't you come by? I will work with people here for about an hour. Come by at 11, and I'll talk with your designs at 11. Can you do that?
Okay.
Will that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. You're welcome to just sit here if you want, but I'm going to, So you guys who want help, the first thing I'm going to do is go get projects for the people who need projects back, and then I'll come back, and so I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Okay, people who want projects. Okay, pull out your student ID. Okay. How do you pronounce XIN? Sim? Simjang. Do I have you under? I don't find one for you. Hang on a minute. Zhang is your last name?
Yep.
I don't have a project for you. Let's take a look and see what's going on. Why don't I have a project for you? Okay, what's your email?
XGHAN 17
107?
17.
17.
Yep.
Oh. Project 2B from Amar, and I never got that back from Amar. Why didn't I? Let me look in the lab and see if he left it in the... Didn't. Did he send you an email? Could you step back a little bit? Oh, I probably have it's in my bag. I know he gave me a list of 2 or 3 people he was having trouble with grading, getting stuff to build. Let's do the following. I will send Amar an email about your project and see what's going on. But stick around. When I go back in there, I have a sheet, I think, in my bag where he listed some people he was having a problem with, and you might be one of them. But what we'll do is I'll make sure. As far as you're concerned, it built. It hasn't been graded. I'll talk to Amar at 2. If he hasn't graded it for one reason or another, either he or I will grade it before the grievance session, and so you can pick it up. You know, while the grievance session is going on, you can look at it, and if you have questions about it, then you can talk to Amar there. Okay, let's do it that way.
Okay.
All right. So I'll make sure that's in Amar. Project 2B, PR2B. Either he or I will grade it for sure. Okay? Okay. But tell you what, don't go away yet because yeah, okay. Jiwoo. Okay. Yep. There you be. Okay. Akshay Goyal. Is that the way you pronounce it?
Yes.
You pronounce it for me.
Akshay Goyal.
Okay. I was close. I have trouble getting the emphasis on the right syllables with Indian names. There you go. There's that. And here's that. Okay. Devin, you're pretty. Is that the right way to pronounce it? Yeah. Sort of. Sort of. Here you go, Devin. Yep. Once I'm looking at origin to see if we got out of order here. Yeah.
It says here that I don't have a grade recorded for project 1. Is that something I need to worry about?
Yeah, you need to. Have you submitted a project? Here, what's your email?
D U.
Okay, hang on a minute. DU
PRE
TI at SYR. Okay. So it's definitely in project. Project 1 was in Project 1A Amar. Did you get back a recorded?
Yeah.
Okay. All you need to do is bring me this. So that was a failure on my part to record. Bring it to me anytime, and I'll record it.
Any specific date and time?
The sooner the better, but it doesn't. You know, It can be the next class,
Okay,
whatever.
during class is fine.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, let's take a look. I am working with people who have basic problems. You know, I didn't plan on doing 2 waves. I didn't tell you we were going to do 2 waves. Okay. Do you guys have specific questions? No? Okay. If you had a specific question, I would sit and answer, but I'm going to work with people who have basic problems. Okay. So. Okay, let me look in my bag and see if I can find yeah. No, you weren't on his list. I think what may have happened is he just missed it.
I see.
So, but either here or I'll grade it today.
Okay.
So and we'll have it for you.
So I can come back at 5 on a baby?
Yeah. Come back at 5. I won't be here, but what I'll do is I'll give it to one of the TAs.
Okay.
You know, if I grade it.
I mean, if you need me to be here earlier, I can be here.
I just don't know when I'll be done with it, that's
Okay.
all.
I will ask the TA.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so you guys come back at 11. I'll work with these guys for an hour, and then come back at 11, and I'll talk about your design. Or you can stay here, you know, whatever you want. So why don't everybody who wants basic help come forward? Are you guys here? No, you're okay. So yeah, come on down here. So what's the issue? Where are you? So have you submitted all 3 projects so far? No. You've submitted. What have you submitted so far? Have you submitted 1?
1 and 2.
1 and 2. Okay. And you submitted 1 and 2. Yeah. So I know your 2 wasn't working well. Okay. How about yours? Was your 2 working okay?
I think just so-so.
Just so-so. Okay. Yeah. So I am going to post one. Oh, let me get rid of this mic. And let me turn off that. I'm going to post one of the good project 2s. One of the good project 2s that you can use your project 4 as the starting point. Now, you can't just take that code and submit it as project 4, or you'll get nothing. But it can be a starting point, just as if it was your own starting point. If you don't change anything in that project 2, anything you don't change, leave the other name on it. And what I would like you to do is, if you decide to do that, send me an email that you're doing that. You know, I don't want there to be a case where we say, oh, there's some copying going on here, you know, blah, blah, you know. So you know, in fairness to the other students, you won't get as much credit as if it was your own. But definitely you can do a good job on project 4 and using that. You'll get but it'll be discounted a little bit because a lot of somebody else. Do you have questions? Have you been able to get the communication system working for project 3? Don't understand? Is it my design you don't understand, or are you having problems with your own design? Yeah, so let me turn this back on again. I'm going to pull up my demo, and then we'll talk a little bit about your questions. Let me. So, if I go to the GUI, so this is my demo, okay? What I posted on Project 3 Health. If I go to the GUI, and I set the properties on the application or console application, which they're set here, okay? So then, when I run it, what I see is I see server console and I see the client console. Okay, this is what's being printed out here are console standard outs in the translator. Now, what I can do, so demonstrate you meet the requirements. You want to set up a whole bunch of tests. That's what we did. So you did that on project 2, right? Do that? So you were demonstrating requirement 2, demonstrate requirement 3, demonstrate requirement 4. You do that? No. Yes? So did you print out when the TA ran your project 2, did it print out testing, testing requirement 3, testing requirement 4, testing requirement 5, and do little demonstrations? Did you do that? Okay. So you're going to do the same kind of thing here. Okay. And now, because I have a console anything I do in here, if I write to the console, you'll see it here. So for example, let's just go to the GUI main window.xml, and so here's the constructor. So here is a process message, okay? So for example, I could just say here, message.show. Now let's run it. So see what's happening. That's a server. Let's pull this guy out. So see what's happening here is I'm printing out messages that I'm sending from the GUI. So in order to demonstrate you meet requirements, you're very likely to need to show a little bit from the GUI what the GUI is doing and a little bit about what the server is doing. And you can do that. The server is already a console application, so you can just like you did in Project 2, you can say, okay, so for requirement, whatever the requirement is, you just say, demonstrating requirement 1, okay. And what I would do is I would in my, I'm not doing a second wave of the, I'm working with people that need a little extra help. If you have a specific question or two, you're welcome, in between to inject that and I'll answer. But, if you look at this part, so here, what you can do is in this, there's a window load event, and I think I'm triggering it here somewhere. Let me see if I can. Load. Yeah, here's a window loaded event. So this window loaded event fires when the window pops up. It means that all that XAML was interpreted and everything was, parsed and ready to go. And here in this window loaded event, I'm starting the COM, but at the end of that, you could have a whole series of tests. Okay, test 2, test 3, test 4, test 5, and demonstrate that you meet the requirements that way. Now, in Project 4, is your question targeted toward Project 3? Have you submitted Project 3 yet? Okay, so it's really targeted toward Project 3, is that correct? So, in Project 3, there isn't an awful lot that you have to demo. You have to have a GUI, and that'll be almost obvious because it'll pop up. Okay, but you have to demonstrate that you're sending messages and files, and you can do that right here in the loaded event. You can construct a message and send that message. So Yeah. That all works. If you're using the COM system prototype that I gave you, that will work, period. Okay. So each client has its own IP address. Okay. I'm sorry, its own port. Each client has its own port because each client will have a listener. Each client has a COM, and so if they have a COM, they have a listener and sender, and each listener has to have its own port number. Localhost port 8081, 8082, 8083, and the server is 8080 maybe. Okay. So, to fully demonstrate you meet the requirements, you should at least show 2 clients once. Okay, but that's enough.
But like browse, so you like basic one, show you the message. Yes, it's coming to the server. Now will send you a message back, or a message from browse.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
check-in, like similar.
Yeah, that's all you have to do for Project 3.
Where does the client to work? Like we need to have client one. The same browsing check.
All you have to do is to show the clients, all you have to do is at one point pull up 2 clients, have them each send a message like an echo message or anything to the server, and have the server send it back. But it's got to come back to the right client.
Yes.
So when client 1 sends a message to the server has to send a reply, and that has to go to client 1. Server 2, and that will all happen automatically if you use the right port numbers. Okay. So, and after that, you don't have to demonstrate. You can do everything with 1 client. And for Project 3, all you need is to you have tabs on the GUI display, but you click the Browse tab. And it's perfectly okay if that just sends a message to the server that says requesting files, and then back it comes. Actually, if you're using my prototype, it's already doing all of that. So you really don't have anything to do except to display. You put show message at the right places. But for check-in and check-out, you don't have to, in Project 3, you don't have to have check-in and check-out. You just send a message requesting check-in, and their server comes back and say a reply to your check-in message or something like that.
Then why is the connect tab needed? Is it just for displaying messages that it is connecting and received connection from the server? The connect tab?
It's to allow you to pick the server that you want to talk to.
You mean
for us, it'll always be just one. But, so that allows you to put in the server port and the server.
And then have a connect button to connect.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
That was the idea.
And for the third project, there's no file transfer, right? Only messages, right?
No, you have to demonstrate you transfer files. The requirement says you have a message communication system that can send messages and files. You have to demonstrate.
From the server or from the client?
You demonstrate it either way. It's okay. I mean, you really should do it from the server to the client because that's but either way, it doesn't really matter. You demonstrate it one way. If you can do it one way, you can do it both ways.
But check-in also has a file transfer, right? But
you're not. You don't have to demonstrate in Project 3 check-in capability. You just have to have a check-in tab and do a little dummy message transfer back and forth. It's just saying I have a GUI that can support what I need to do for Project 4.
Yeah, but if I wanted to transfer the file from the GUI, then will I have to implement something on the translator for doing the file transfer? Because
No. That's all taken care of for you. All you need to do in your message, if you have a file attribute, if you have an attribute whose key is FILE, it'll try to send a file. And what it will do, you'll have a file and then a file name. And what it does is it goes and looks in its COM. Its COM has a send files and receive files.
Like the one we had in SMA.
Yeah, it works the same way. It's here, and it works now. But if you look at this, let me pull this up. Go to SU at 687 code. Project 3 helps Spring 18. If you go into CPP-COM file transfer, here's a save files and send files. And that's just used as a staging directory, okay? So if I have a file, if I send a message that has a file attribute and a file name, COM will look in that folder for a file of that name and will send it block, 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 block to the other end, and the other end will save it in its save files. Okay? And so you can just use those as staging directories. You can do other things, you know, those, the way my prototype, just they're fixed in the prototype, but you can make them, you know, you could tell COM, no, here's where I want you to, you know, you could move those directories around. There would a little bit of work to do that, but you don't have to. The easiest thing to do is just use them as staging directories. And so when you want to check in a file, you copy it into my send files directory. Okay, and on the server side, it'll wind up in his save files, and he just pulls it out.
So for this metadata tab, what do we have to display the file or?
There was no requirement for a metadata tab. Amar had a metadata tab on it. I wouldn't have.
View file. No, view file. So for that, should we use the file?
I think he had a metadata tab, but anyway.
No, but in the requirement there's a view file tab, right?
Yeah,
So,
and but again, remember that in Project 3, you don't have to implement any of that functionality. All you got to do is have the tabs and send messages back and forth to show.
so only on the console we just have to show that the server received file
Yeah,
request. And
yeah,
then
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the message would be
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah. So you have a console, just like I did, a console behind that window, and on the console, you show that the messages are flowing the right way. Okay.
one more thing. In the requirements, there's one last requirement in which we have to do automated test.
Yep.
Is it the same as where we have multiple tests and we pass through?
Yep. And that's what I was just answering. There's a load file in this demo. You know, I'm capturing this window loaded event, and what I do is I use it to start up COM. But once COM is started up, you can now down here you can start implementing tests. Okay. And if you set the client like I did, set the client application to be console instead of a Windows application, any console writes you do in those tests will show up on the console. Okay, I just added here in my message loop, I added a show message, and now when you run it, I just did it 2 minutes ago. And now when you run it, there's those messages going. Okay.
This tab that you just showed, which has directories and files, this is actually for creating metadata, right? I mean, this same concept will be used.
No. That's what I'm implementing is most of the browse capability. Allow you to look at files. Now, the idea is that, let me get rid of this message because it was getting in the way of what was going on here. Wherever I put that. Where did I put that?
For the check-ins, we
Just a minute. Let me just. What the heck? I did something, I just broke this. This is correct, but I did something and I just broke it without. Oh, I know what's going on. That's because now it should work. Yes. So now the idea is this is really a browse tab, and now when I double click on a file, I didn't implement it here, but up pops a window, and in that window it has two panes. One pane shows the source code, and the other pane shows a description pulled out of the metadata from the, that's one good way to do it. Very useful. But now I can browse around the repository, and I can see the source code, and I can see the description of what it is, what it's doing.
So view file tab would be needed. We actually need to show it in a pop-up.
You can do it either way. That view tab was just something that Amar did.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Just his. That's why that was his model. Okay. It's not necessarily my model. I would do it this way. I wouldn't have a view tab. I would have a browse tab that showed this would be my browse tab. Okay. And I would double click on a file, and up would pop a code window. Okay. That's what I would do for the browse. But you don't have to use my design either. So. Did I answer your question? Do you kind of get an idea of what you got to do here? Not yet. Maybe. I'm not sure I understand your question yet. So, what you're saying is, I'm not having trouble with the code, I'm having trouble deciding how to do the design. The design of the GUI. Okay, I see what you're doing. Yeah, that's why I was suggesting that you have a console that runs behind it. So here, what you could do, give me your GUI again. So here, I like this. I like what you're doing. You're showing, I'm executing this test, I'm executing this test, I'm executing this test. But now in the GUI, you print out some of the details, okay? So maybe one good way to do it, why don't you come around so you can see it? Maybe one good way of doing it is have a little button here, and you do one of these tests every time you click the button. Okay, maybe. And then what happens here is I click the button, get my first test, so you have a button, click for each test. So you click the button, you print out, I'm doing this test, and then in the console behind it, you're printing out the details. That would be fun. Okay. If you wanted to, you could write the details here. I mean, is this a list box? Then you can't write the details. Okay. Yeah. So, or, using a console behind it is the easiest thing. Yeah. So, you don't need to change the code in the translator at all. If you change it, see, all the translator is doing is taking messages from the GUI and translating them so they can send it over the comm channel. That's all the translator's doing. Just like I showed you, I just printed out of this GUI, not the translator, out of this GUI, I printed a message. Let me do something again here. So in window loaded, I'm not in the translator. Let me go to the window loaded. Okay, so here in the window loaded, we kill all these things. Now let me just write here in window loaded. If I can find my window loaded event. Window loaded. So here, console write /ends window loaded. Let me run it. window loaded. I wasn't there before. I didn't do it in the translator. I did it in the GUI. Okay? And the reason that works is that I changed the property of the GUI. Okay, let me kill this. I went to the GUI and I changed this property from Windows application to console application. This used to be, right out of the, from the wizard, this was Windows application. And all I did was come here and I changed it to console application and rebuilt it. And now every time you write something, you say console.out. Anywhere in that GUI, it'll write it out to the console. Okay? So you don't need to change the translator at all, and I wouldn't.
Is it not required to show this message in the GUI? I think it was mentioned to show it in the status bar.
I think it's a good idea to show message, to have a pane that shows message flow, but not required. Let's look at the requirements. Let's pull up the requirements and take a look at it.
What about for the fourth project? Console will
Again, I think it's a good idea, but you're not required. I've given you a lot of freedom, and I intended to give you a lot of freedom on how you implement. I really want you to design. I don't want you to implement my design. I want you to design it. So, in project 3, see, all it said was, shall provide a client graphical user interface that supports tabs for these views. Okay. And didn't say that, and I have said specifically, you don't have to supply checking capability. You don't have to supply, just show messages going back. So it's just setting up the framework for doing project 4. And then in project 4, if you go to the project 4 requirements, you'll see I've given you all kinds of room, you got to provide a repository that provides this functionality, but I haven't told you how you're going to do it. Shall provide a client that can upload and download files and view repository contents, blah, blah, blah. Shall provide a message passing, You have lots of freedom to do it however you want to.
Actually, yesterday I was trying to implement sending the files from the check-in. So for project 3, instead of showing that that the client sent the message and the server received the message, can I show for satisfying the requirement that check-in the client sent the file
sure.
and received?
Absolutely. And understand that the way COM is set up now, it uses those save files and send files as staging areas. So you have to copy stuff into it and copy it out of it. Okay. And there's, you can do it other ways, but that's what the prototype does. And they're down in COM. They're not at the top level repository, they're down in the COM folder. I just used because I had them to demonstrate COM to myself to make sure that the COM could send files correctly. And so I just left them that way, put COM there, and now, my code just using them. I'm not in what I handed out, my COM demo demonstrates file transfer, but my prototype doesn't. I'm not transferring files. But I am now at home, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just using those staging directors. Using those as staging directors. Make sense? So did that clear? Yeah. Yeah. You don't really need to wait. See, the whole idea is that you don't need to wait with these asynchronous communication systems. So what you're doing is, if you want to check in a file, what you're doing is you you send a message the way I would do it. See, each has a send file, and on the other end, there's a receive file function that are matching up together. But this guy on the receive end has to know that you're going to send him a file. So the right way, the easy way to do it is, if I want to send the repository a file, I send him a message that tells him, I'm going to send you a file. Okay, and then he sends me back a message requesting that file, and that triggers. So he sends me a message that says file name. So what happens is I want to send him this file. So I put the file in the send files folder. I copy it in, and then I send him a message that tells him you got to go request this file from me. Okay, the comm system was really designed to request a file be sent to you. You know, I didn't do an upload and download. I just did an upload because you don't need to, because all I need to do, if I want to download, I just tell him, you know, to upload a file to me. You with me? That way there's only one set of functionality. Well, you said you were sending it to you want to send a file for the check-in file. Client knows the file he wants to check in. He better. How else is he going to check in a file if he doesn't know what the name is? Client's got to know the name of the file to check in, right? Right? So I got this repository over there. I've been building some code. Now I want to check it in. I know the names of those files. So what I do is I copy the file I want to send to the server into my send files directory, and then I send him a message to send me a file message. It's a message with a file attribute and the name of the file, and that triggers my comm to send it to him. You know, it's a little roundabout, but it was just so that we didn't have to implement both file upload and download. That way you could just, it's simple enough. And so what happens is, you know, that'll get to the repository, in the repository, and the repository won't get the message, you know, until that file has been saved, then the repository gets a message that he's got that file, and he just copies it out. The same thing works the other way. When you want to get a file, when you want to extract a file from the repository, you just do the reverse process. Make sense? So it's like this. Now, what happens is, if I send a message, so in my message, if I have a file, some file name, this is an attribute in my message. This says to this comm, send this file over here. So, so now if I want the server to send me a file, I want to extract it, I got to go send him a message to send me that file. okay? And what happens is, when that file is come up and finished, so the chunk, and then the file is closed, then that receive thread puts that message in the message queue. So the next time my receive thread will get that message that that file has been sent, and that causes me to go copy it wherever I want to put it, if I want to move it. Or for your demonstration, it just causes you to print out, I received this file. That makes sense.
So if the client wants to send a file, so it sends a message to the server, please ask for this file.
Yes.
And then the same
Yeah,
thing.
that's just so you don't have to implement both upload and download. It's always upload. Everything is upload. So if I want the server to upload to me I want to download, I send a message to the server to tell me to send me the file. And I really, I probably want to send either way. I want to send a message to the other end first, just so that it may be that he'll need to prepare for it, but as long as you're using these directories, he probably doesn't need to. He just uses those directories. If you came for a second wave of the help session, there isn't a second wave of the help session. Okay. So, Encore came for the second wave. Okay, and we're answering questions, but I'm basically working with people that need some help. So does that make sense? Here's what I would suggest you do. You go look at take a look at the test stub in the COM with file transfer. So what I have here, if you, so this is, I'm looking at what's in Project 3 Help Spring, this is a prototype. And if you go down to COM, the message passing COM, which is what I call COM with file transfer, so it's exactly the same thing. If you look at the test stub in com.cpp, down to it. Well, if you look through this, you'll see places where I'm sending files. Go look at that. I'm not doing a second wave. I just did a first wave. Okay. I'll answer a couple of quick questions, but there's no second wave this morning. Okay. So what you should do, go take a look at look at COM. Just set this project up. This is now set as static library. Reset it to a console application from a static library, set it as a startup project and run it, and then go look at how it's transferring files. It's doing it just the way I said here, but if you look at it, it'll be a little clearer how that works. Okay. Once you've done that, now you can come up and do this demo. All right. Is that helping? It's already there. If you're using my Project 3 demo, it's all there. I'm not, in my demo, I wasn't sending files, but the capability to send it is here. All you got to do is, if you run that, you'll see COM sending messages. Okay.
These.
Yeah.
Yeah, what? We maybe talked One is the detached GUI.
Well, there's a receive thread that's pulling messages out of the receive queue. But he's got to dispatch them to the main thread. If that message requires anything to happen on the GUI, and almost every message does, then you've got to dispatch. What you've got to do is have a function designed in the GUI to handle that message, so that the main thread can do. So the child thread gets this message, and the child thread knows that something has to happen in the window. Maybe let's write something in a text box or write something in a list box. So what has to happen is that child thread has to dispatch a request for the main thread to call a particular function to do that job. And so for each of the jobs that the message has to do, you have to have a function that the main thread can call. And so the child thread just dispatches a request for the main thread to call that function, passing in the data he needs. The child thread is not allowed to access it directly. You've got to go through that dispatcher invoke.
Provide the file name, right? The file name.
Are you talking about project 3 or project 4?
Project. So is it on the part of project 3? You have to click on the file name and then.
In project 3, all you're required to do is have a GUI that has the tabs, you don't have to have any real repository functionality behind you. You just have to show that messages go back and forth. You do have to show that file transfer, you can do file transfer.
So like for the browse functionality, we just have to show that this is the file and this is the content.
I gave you the browse functionality. It's there in the prototype. Click. Now, so, I told you that a good way to show that the file is being transferred is for you to click on that, double click on the, I didn't implement that, but if you double click on that file in that in the file part of the window that I gave you, then what you do is you send a message to the repository to send you that file. He sends you that file, and when you get the message in the client proc, for that message, when that message comes in that the file has been sent, that proc, what it does is it pops up a window. You have to what? You can use anything you want. In project 3, are we talking about project 3 or project 4? In project 3, you're obligated to have a tab display, and it can just send a message. For example, check-in might just send a message to the repository, I'm checking in, with nothing. And the server sends back a message, I received your check-in request. So all is required. You can do that for check-in, check-out, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, you do have to show that you can send a file. That's part of the requirement. And you can do it any way you want. I suggested that you use this pop-up window because you're going to do the same thing in Project 4, probably, and so that'll just get that done for Project 4. How are we doing? That makes sense? So you, yeah? Other question? Okay. All right, so here's what I would suggest is that you start doing just a little bit of the testing, and then see one of the TAs, if you're, is this, am I doing this right? Okay. You can always come up, you can always show me, but I need you to work with the TAs first, just because there's enough of you that if everybody came to me, then I'd be swamped. So, I I think it's a really good idea if you're having trouble to do a little bit. When you kind of get stuck, you don't know what to do next. Now you can sit down with the TA and say, here's what I got. I don't know how to take this next step. And they can help you. All right, makes sense. I will post one of the good project 2s for project 4. In the summer?
Yeah.
No, it's not true. There are 3 weeks in the summer that I won't be here, but it isn't the first 3.
Oh.
I'm going to be here at least the first 2. My plans haven't totally gelled yet. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I'll be here for at least the first 2. I won't be here every day. You know, what I do in the summer is I come in once a week. I'm going to do this project 4 myself, the way I think it ought to be done. No, summer projects are whatever you want to work on. The way the summer projects work is I hold an orientation meeting where I describe how it works. Okay, and then the first meeting, you know, what these summer project meetings do. When I'm coming in, you know, there's a Piazza sign up for summer projects. And so anybody that signed up, I send an email and that goes out to everybody who's signed into Piazza that I'm coming in on Friday, June 2nd, or whatever it is. Okay. And I'm going to talk about, and anybody that wants to talk about their project work is invited to do so. So I come in, I talk a little bit about what I'm doing, you know, and I ask questions about, you know, the projects you're working on. You can work on anything you want, anything that interests you. I think it's a good idea to work on one of your class projects and try to design it really, really well so that when you go into an interview, you know, you've got something to talk about. And we'll give you, you know, when you present, we'll do it like a design review. You know, we'll critique your design. And, you know, that'll give you practice both. That's a good thing to do. You know, people get nervous. They don't want to do it, but that's a really good thing to get up and present your work like that, because it's exactly what an interviewer is going to do. You talked about, this project sounds interesting. Get up the whiteboard and tell me a little bit about the project. Well, sketch out a little bit of the color for this thing. How did you do that? You know, those are the kind of questions we're going to. So if you thought really hard, you know, now a second pass at the project, a second, you know, attempt, and you know a lot more now, so you can get it, you know, get it right. That's, you know, no obligation. You can work on anything you want to, but I think that's a good thing to do.
So yesterday actually I was looking at the MySlice Summer 2018. So there is something called master thesis which is from 3 to 6 credits. So is there any point in taking that? I mean, I have a project.
You know, we don't really encourage people to do. If you want to go on to a doctoral program, you should do a master's thesis. If you're not planning on taking pursuing a doctorate, don't do a thesis. A thesis is a lot of work. You're opening a thread of research. You really got to do research. You got to defend it in front of a committee. If they don't like it, you don't pass. Okay, so you get to go back and do it again, and you keep working until they're happy with it. Okay, so that's what doctoral students go through. You know, for someone whose goal is to become really technically proficient, to become a technical software developer, you don't need to do that. We don't really encourage you unless you're going to go on for a doctorate to do it.
And the project that I'm implementing this summer, can it be language independent, for example, Python and something?
Anything you want. I'll be
discuss with you in the summer project.
Yeah, in the summer project you can do anything you want. Well, so you want to use Java?
Python.
Python. Oh, okay. So you want to? Have you done Python before, or is this just a learning experience for you?
I've done Python.
Okay. So why would you choose to implement something in Python? Python is quick and easy.
No, because I'm
slow.
The project that I'm doing it's based on machine learning, and
Okay.
I need to create
Sure, that's fine. Absolutely fine. You know, I've only tinkered a little tiny bit with Python myself. I think Python's useful. I think it's a useful integrating tool. That's why QA organizations often use Python, because it could integrate, you know, and, set up testing harnesses and stuff like that really in a really flexible way. But and Python certainly has some interesting modules now, you know, language translation, interpretation, and you know, natural language processing, and machine learning, and you know, lots of interesting stuff. So you're welcome to. I won't be as much help.
I would need help only in the design part because
Yeah.
not in the language, but
Yeah.
in the design part.
Yeah. Welcome to do that.
Professor?
Yeah.
For the summer project, do I have to be on campus to do it, or?
No,
Or can I do
it's,
it, like,
you
long
get
before?
more out of it if you're on campus, but if you go home for the summer and you want to participate in the summer projects, you'll hear, you know, you'll get these email messages that I'm going to talk about, you know, and I might decide to take them. I don't know whether I will or not, you know. It's kind of a pain. I probably won't.
I mean, like, I
But-
was like, sprint one, like, I implement whatever I have in this repository project, and then, get
Yeah, what
another-
you can do is you
Have
can
a
use Piazza to ask questions and stuff. The problem is when you're not here, it's hard to give you detailed help. It's easy to give you superficial help, but it's hard to give you detailed help. If you're here in person, I can sit down next to you and we can look at your design, you know, see what's going on. Are you planning on going home, or do you have an internship, or what's your?
Yeah, unfortunately, like, for some, my
You know, it's, if you, I would suggest to you, if you can find a way, if there's somebody's, you know, that you can find who's staying on campus who's willing to share with you, then staying here is a good idea, because that'll give you a chance for a lot more wideband help, okay? But, you know, I'm not gonna be, I'm only gonna be in once a week. You know, but that means that once a week you could get an hour conversation with me on the project you're working on. If you're home, I can't give you that much help. You know, I'll give you whatever help I can, but you know, email help or Piazza help, you know, you can't do really detailed stuff on Piazza. But for example, if you said, I am working on this part of the project and I don't know how to do this. If I had some code that was very similar to what you're trying to do, I could carve it out, make a little demo, and post it and say, here, take a look at this, you know, that sort of thing. So I would suggest you participate. If you need to go home, that's fine. And, you know, just do whatever you can. You know, even if you can't fully participate, just doing, you know, revisiting your project and trying to do a better design on it while you're at home is a good thing. And you know, you will have a chance to ask questions, and you will have a chance to look at some demo code. And when you come back in the fall, you can ask for some time. Can I sit down with you? You know, before everything got busy, and I'll sit down with you and look at what you did. Are there other questions, project-oriented questions?
Can you show how? So I'm just looking at the code. So on the server prototype for it, which is implemented in CPP. For sending file, you are adding reply dot.
No, all of that is in COM. So what I haven't implemented that in the server, but what you need to do is, I have it in this prototype. So what you need to do, so in COM, all you need to do is have the file you want here, and you send a message with the attributes of this file, naming that file, and then it'll get sent. Okay? So in my send files, if I post a message that has file attribute and the name of that file, comma send. So what you need to do is you need to have on the, so what will happen is that'll come here and he'll get a message in his message queue that the file was sent. And now you got to have a server proc that does whatever you want to do with that file. Okay, so you have a server proc that responds to that message that does whatever.
Yeah, but in on the client side, how are you adding the attribute on the message part? You said you have to add the attribute.
You got to build a message. So what happens is, if you, for example, let's suppose I have a text box with a file name and I have a button that says send. You know, it's probably not what you're going to do, but let's suppose you did that. Okay. Then when you click that button handler has to build a message that says file, that file name, and it also has to copy that file wherever it is into the send files, and then it just sends the message. Okay. So COM takes care of that file transfer. As if you use those staging directories, but you have to copy. So your procs, the client proc has to copy. If the client wants to send a file, it's got to copy the file into that send file directory down in COM.
Okay, so it's CS message inside attributes dictionary. I have to add a new attribute called file and add the name in that.
Yep. No, and what you should see, take a look at it. Just go to COM. Set it, instead of being a static library, set it to console application. And so what you need to do, just to run COM, right out of the demo, you just come into message passing COM, and you go to its properties, and you say application, and you go into CCPP, and you say preprocessor, and instead of saying no test COM, you get rid of no. Okay. Now, okay, and I'll set this up as startup. I run it. And it's sending files. So here, server-com received message, file sender, sent logger.cpp. You can go look and see, what's going on, how did that happen? And now in your client proc, you got to set up what COM is expecting. Okay, so look at that message, look at the way I structured that message, okay? And so the translator is all the translator does is it takes your CS message attributes and copy and builds a message that just has those same attributes, okay, a native message, and sends it. And so you have to set up whatever. If you want to use the COM file transfer mechanism as COM has set it up, if you want to change it, that's fine, feel free to, but where I am implementing Project 4, I would do it this way. I would just use those as staging directories because it's simple, quick, and straightforward.
That's it.
1 second, let me put this back so I don't get confused. Got a question?
Yeah, for the file metadata, about NoSQL DB, about integrating NoSQL DB.
Could you ask your question again? I didn't hear it all.
Yeah, like for the file metadata, you said something about implementing NoSQL DB in the server and.
Yeah, you have to. So in order to satisfy both Project 3 and Project 4, you have to have the NoSQL database there, and you have to use